All right, so I guess we'll get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for hopping on to Whispers in the Workplace Investigations. We are here because you have taken the first step to ensure your company's protection in the event of a workplace investigation. Studies have indicated that 60% of American workers have reported experiencing workplace harassment, with 41% stating that employers did not investigate their complaints. This lack of responsiveness has the potential to create a situation that could only result in low morale and reduced productivity, but possible litigation should the issue move forward outside of the workplace. When employees feel unheard, they may resort to airing their concerns publicly, potentially on social media or with colleagues, which, as we know, can lead to adverse consequences for the company or that low morale and lack of productivity that I just mentioned. The potential for litigation comes in if employees pursue legal action outside of the workplace seeking resolution. In this presentation, we're going to delve into common scenarios necessitating workplace investigations, explore effective questioning techniques, and address potential pitfalls to help safeguard your organization, as well as dealing with the aftermath. I would like to introduce my colleague who was good enough to allow me to take part in this webinar, Christine Ippolito. Floor is yours.
Oh, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today and investing your valuable time in learning about this very critical topic. My name is Christine Ippolito. I'm the founder and principal of Compass Workforce Solutions. We have 14 years of track record of success in delivering HR services. We're an award-winning HR human resource consulting firm dedicated to providing expertise to entrepreneurial organizations and companies that are looking to grow or scale their operations. Our work is focused on 4 key areas of HR that make a difference in business profitability, scalability, and business evaluation: compliance, operational controls, dealing with workplace conflicts, and employee, team, and organizational assessment using the predictive index. So we are part of the largest PI team in the world, PI Mid-Atlantic. And that's a photo of the PI team below. There's about 35 of us across the country that provide PI tools, resources, and support to our clients to create a more productive, positive, team-oriented environment. And I'm also sharing a little bit with you about my personal life. So that is my rescue Chihuahua, Little P. Little P has taught me a lot about how people can respond under stress and duress, and that sometimes a softer, gentler approach gets a much better result when dealing with someone who is having challenges. I will let Carrie introduce herself. Carrie is my colleague, and I'm very grateful to have her on the Compass team. She brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to our HR consulting practice.
Thank you. I am, as Christine said, an HR business partner here at Compass Workforce Solutions. I am a certified HR professional. I hold the SHRM-CP certification, and I've also just recently earned the Predictive Index Talent Optimizer certification about a week ago, and I'm very excited to get started learning even more about PI and helping our clients with that. I have a master's degree in human resources management out of St. Joseph's College. Personally, I spend most of my time with my family. The bottom photo is some of my family in Aruba, one of our favorite places. What do they say, the happiest place other than Disney. And the other photos are just, joking around a little bit, and sometime over in Quebec during Winter Carnival, which, although I don't like the cold, I do, for some strange reason, love to walk around the cities of Canada in boots and a coat that goes down to my toes and explore the area. I guess that's enough about me. Now that you know more about the two of us, let's dive into this presentation. There's a lot to cover, as you would imagine. Our key objectives here are going to be understanding the purpose and need. Here we'll discuss what items usually require an investigation and the fundamental purpose of workplace investigations, with an emphasis on the fact that they're essentially for maintaining a safe, compliant, and ethical work environment. We'll talk about legal compliance, touching on the legal and regulatory framework that necessitates workplace investigations, briefly discussing how anti-discrimination laws, labor laws, and Americans with Disabilities Act may factor in. We'll talk about interviewing techniques, where we'll explore basic interviewing techniques, including active listening, open-ended questions, and the need for the lack of bias. Documentation and record keeping will also be discussed. We're going to stress in this webinar that the significance of accurate and detailed documentation throughout the investigation, its role in protecting the organization and ensuring fairness, and how to organize the investigation. And finally, we'll round it out with preventing future issues. We'll offer strategies and best practices for preventing future workplace issues, and we'll touch upon the role of proactive HR policies and training. Got a shameless plug here, because you know that Compass Workforce Solutions can help in shoring up existing policies and handbooks or creating new ones. So please do feel free to contact us after the webinar for more information. Ever the question, do I need to initiate an investigation? Let's take a look at some common situations that typically lead to a need for an investigation. Substance abuse. This is incredibly challenging to prove. Best practice, as Christine said just recently when we were planning this, is to focus on the behavior. If an employee is sleeping at their desk, does it matter if it's because they're suspected to be on drugs? No. Are they arguing with others? Are they not following safety procedures? Is there an excessive absentee problem? Look for this rather than focusing on something that you may suspect but be challenged to prove. I think most of us have been in this boat. Let's go ahead and focus on the things that we can prove to safeguard your workplace. Next is claims of violence or threats against others. What is legitimate verbal threat at work? Threats are actual statements made to another person in which the speaker declares that they expect to cause that person loss, punishment, or harm. They can be any oral or written expression or gesture that can be interpreted, and this is important, by a reasonable person as conveying an intent to cause physical harm to persons or property. Next, we have sexual harassment. Also, violation of workplace rules and discrimination claims. Internal discrimination complaints are charges that allege a violation of federal or state law or company policy related to unlawful discrimination. These may involve issues such as disciplinary action, performance evaluation, pay, promotion, harassment, or retaliation. Handling internal discrimination complaints properly is important to prevent further problems and potential legal liability. And rounding this out, we have abuse of sick leave and falsification of time cards.
So that's not all that happens at work. Oftentimes, in addition to this, we have signs and symptoms that something else is going wrong. So vandalism and other types of company sabotage to equipment or property is often motivated by various factors. Employees that are angry at the company, they could be looking for revenge. They feel that they're under peer pressure. We also saw a lot of issues in 2022 with political activism. So vandalism can have, oh goodness, what did I just do? Oops, no, we don't want to, oh, here, previous. My apologies. So swift action is really needed to understand why is vandalism occurring. Customer complaints, several issues of theft have come through customer complaints. So we've had clients where employers and managers are finding out that equipment, time, labor is being used while employees are supposed to be actively engaged in work, but essentially working for themselves and taking money from customers and then delivering a subpar or a product or a service that does not meet typical standards. Workplace theft, inventory issues, items that are missing, also conflicts of interest, bullying, altercation or falsification of employee data, and also excessive absenteeism. So now that we have discussed with you some of the issues that may cause the need to initiate a workplace investigation, there's a few red flags to look for when considering, do I really need to conduct a full-fledged investigation? So red flags. You might see changes of behavior in the workplace or a sense that an employee is disengaged or isolating themselves sometimes or all the time. Employees may mention that they feel uncomfortable around another employee, that they feel intimidated, or they don't feel safe at work. You might hear the words inappropriate behavior, conflict, challenges, arguments, bullying, and of course, hostile work environment. These are really particular markers that a situation needs to be further looked at and an investigation may need to be conducted. Specifically, protected class complaints. So if you take a complaint like this and it's not addressed, or managers witness or observe these types of issues and challenges, you have the potential for claims of discrimination and wrongful, unlawful workplace misconduct. This could include accommodation requirements, discrimination allegations, violations of protected job leave, such as family medical leave or New York State paid family leave, charges of not paying equal wages, or again, accusations of hostility at work or violence at work. You definitely need to preserve records that you properly took down the complaint and that you addressed the complaint, that the employer listened, took it seriously, produced a finding, and did your absolute best efforts to resolve that employee's concerns. So when we're discussing protected class complaints, what does that cover? So those could be complaints that people feel that they're being treated differently because of their race, their gender, their age. They're being treated as if they have a disability, or it's perceived that they have a disability, or they may truly have a disability that's physically visible to others. They could also be have veteran status. So those are some of the top reasons that a claim would fall under protected category. You really want to be careful. I just mentioned people being treated as if they have a disability when in fact they have not asked for an accommodation or declared the need for an accommodation. We see this a lot when employers make assumptions that someone cannot perform certain types of roles or functions, maybe based on something like pregnancy, a recent medical procedure, or they've discussed having an illness or a medical concern with their manager or supervisor. So one of the biggest mistakes that employers make is also not addressing unethical or illegal behavior. You want to resolve this quickly. You want to demonstrate having a commitment to these standards so that you can avoid potential lawsuits, fines, or sanctions. Bullying also becomes a challenge. So bullying is very destructive in the work environment. It's when employees attempt to make someone feel less than part of the group. And that can also lead to people that feel disengaged, are unproductive, and you'll see signs of excessive absenteeism at work. Criminal acts. So if there are allegations of criminal acts, or you believe that vandalism and theft has occurred, law enforcement should be involved. If the complaint involves criminal allegations, it warrants thorough examination and action. Oftentimes, this is best conducted by police or outside authorities, because the requirements for investigating those types of complaints could expand beyond the workplace. This could also include violence in the workplace, theft, illegal drug use, retribution for refusing to obey unlawful instructions, refusing, asking employees to engage in behavior that's clearly not safe or lawful, falsifying of company documents, manipulating reports, or abuse of power. Vague or non-legal complaints. So when we focus on legal liability and only legal liability, it's quite possible that we could miss situations that we really should address. So unclear complaints, vague allegations, and general overall employee conflict or gossip in the workplace, even in remote or hybrid environments, really should be a cause for concern. While we might consider only mere workplace incivility, that can quickly escalate and cause other types of problems. So when uncivility and uncivil behavior or rude and obnoxious behavior is left unaddressed, it often escalates into behavior that now bridges into discriminatory behavior or harassing behavior. So in those particular cases, you would definitely want to conduct an investigation to determine what the workplace conflicts actually are so that they can be mitigated and resolved. Unresolved practical problems. Again, another missed red flag that could result in a workplace investigation revolves around adverse actions taken against an employee. So not just terminations, but this could include minor moves such as a demotion, a transfer, a reassignment, or a change in a work schedule. They can, if left unaddressed, result in more serious complaints or legal charges. So by understanding and looking for these red flags, you can proactively address potential issues and foster a much more healthier and compliant workplace environment.
So now we thought we'd take a moment to get an idea of what your comfort level is with the workplace investigation. Well, our Slido is not working, probably because it's on my computer. So what we'd like to do is open up the chat and please let us know what your comfort level is with a workplace investigation. You can respond with either what's a workplace investigation, or you could say I'm comfortable with workplace investigations, I've performed a few, or I have been involved in a workplace investigation in some way. Please feel free to enter that into the chat right now and we'll explore it. See if we're getting any responses in the chat. Oh, we have maybe one there. Let's see. Great. We have someone who's comfortable with the workplace investigation, quite comfortable. This is what I do. I like that. I'm comfortable. I've led several investigations. That's amazing. That's tough, right? And we'll definitely we'll talk more about that. Anyone here who really just has never been involved in a workplace investigation? Someone's moderate, wants to ensure you're consistent. That's excellent and that's important. Okay. We have time for maybe one or two more. Never been involved. Okay, don't worry. We'll get you conversant as best we can. And definitely do feel free to reach out to us after the workshop. If you do have some questions, we're more than happy to help. All right, so let's move on to the next topic here. Let's talk about what may cause us to, we talked about what may cause us to initiate an investigation, and we've discussed a few red flags. So now let's explore a few things to consider before initiating the investigation. Is it appropriate for the complainant or subject of the complaint to remain in the workplace during the investigation? Is it appropriate to engage a third-party expert to undertake or assist in the investigation? This may be warranted in the case of financial impropriety, for example, so please keep your eye on that. Is there a legal requirement to conduct the investigation report, the outcome of the investigation? Examples include the harassment having been reported to an outside agency, which is mandating investigations. And now throughout your investigation, definitely never promise that something will be kept confidential. You can say, I will do what I can to avoid having to identify you by name, but never assume that also that your communications will be private. Remember that the responsibility for maintaining confidentiality lies with both the employer and the employee. Remind all involved that it is their responsibility to refrain from discussion unless warranted by the investigation, and that retribution is not tolerated or allowed in any way. At the beginning of the witness interview, emphasize this and be sure to emphasize again that the company does not allow any retaliation. Avoid investigation creep by clearly understanding the scope of the matter. That's tough, so definitely keep that in mind. It's easy for the scope of the investigation to creep in all different directions. I guess we call that going down a rabbit hole. So now that's me again. Well, look at that. You're hearing from me a lot more than you expected to. So now we're going to look at planning the investigation. Your plan could be as simple as a checklist, the one that you're seeing on your left, or a detailed plan with lots of information included like the one on the right. You will want to, however, ensure that you include the purpose and scope of the investigation. Specificity is key here. You will also need to be sure to include the investigation team and what steps will be taken in the investigation process, as well as who is responsible for ensuring that the final report is prepared and the verdict reported. As our thank you for attending this webinar, Compass will be sending everyone our guide to the 10 fundamental steps for conducting a workplace investigation.
If you want, you can take a picture of this slide, or when you get the follow-up email with the recording, there's going to be a PDF attachment that you can download and save so that you have it as a future resource. So as we're preparing to conduct an investigation, one of the most critical decisions that you make as a member of management is who should conduct workplace investigation interviews, who should be asking the questions. So when you plan your investigation, particularly the interview portion, be sure to consider that the interviewer should be a good listener, who's empathetic, who can make fair judgments, and knows how to give space and time to allow interviewees to open up and express themselves freely. Oftentimes, companies will hire an outside investigator, but if you're not able to do this, or it's a small complaint, something that you feel that you can handle internally, a good rule of thumb is to choose a member of the management team who can be unbiased and put interviewers at ease. Someone who can be empathetic, but not appear to take sides and not appear to make judgments in the middle of conversations. This person also needs to be someone who has a history of adhering to the need for confidentiality and is viewed as a trusted person within the organization by other employees and managers. In the absence of experience, make sure to have a good plan for your investigation and to follow each step very carefully. Please consider that if employees do not feel heard in the course of conducting the investigation, and I know Carrie and I have both mentioned this several times before, but it really bears repeating. You know, it's always interesting to us when we're asked to conduct an investigation and we'll say to members of management, we feel strongly we need 45 minutes to an hour. And they're very surprised that anyone would need more than 15 or 20 minutes. The challenge becomes when you're sitting down to talk to employees and you're asking open-ended questions about what's going on at work. This potentially could be the first time that they've had an opportunity to share their concerns about what's going on in the workplace. So it's really important that they're allowed to speak, that they're not rushed, that they're not overly pressured to go fast. So we always want to give, investigators should give themselves space and time. You definitely don't want to rush the conversation. You want to allow adequate time between talking to each person and each interviewee. This really gives people the sense that they've been heard and that they've been listened to. Also, you want to also give yourself a little space and time between talking to different employees so that you can reorganize your thoughts jot down particular notes and ensure that there's adequate time to collect yourself and that you feel like you're fresh to move on. It's very intense to be in the moment, to be watching someone's behavior, to be taking notes and listening to what they're saying. It's not unusual for us when we do investigations as a Compass team that there's more than one of us involved and that one person is asking the questions and another person is taking extremely detailed notes on what the employee is sharing with us.
So best practices for conducting an investigation will include, excuse me, establishing a clear investigation timeline. You'll definitely want to develop a structured timeline for the investigation and make sure that you consider the order of the interviews as well as the chronology of events. It also includes communicating the purpose, clearly explain to interviewees why they're being interviewed, emphasizing that it relates to a workplace incident while maintaining confidentiality is important. Taking a balanced approach with the accused. When you're interviewing the accused, you may choose to delay revealing their status as the subject of the complaint until later in the questioning. But it is crucial to ensure that the accused has an opportunity to provide their perspective. You'll want to follow company protocol. Here, it's important to follow the organization's established investigation protocol. You should have one. You need to ensure consistency and compliance with internal policies and external regulations. You want to take timely action. Definitely avoid unnecessary delays in the investigation process. You want to ensure a prompt and effective resolution. Ask relevant questions. That's very important. Develop and ask the right questions as pertinent to the specific case. Develop them ahead of time. Don't wing it. Focus on gathering accurate and pertinent information ahead of time. There's no reason that you can't add questions here as you go along, but you should have a solid base. Take some time up front to organize your thoughts. Gather information. Gather an employee complaint, a supervisor's report, written earnings, materials like emails or threatening letters. Now let's go over what you should ask yourself and your team, as well as types of questions to ask and those not to ask during the interview. How are you going to get the answers that you need? That is probably the key question, right? So key questions that you yourself should think about before you're even asking anybody questions are, how can the fact gathering part of the investigation be as fair and bias-free as possible? I feel like I can't stress that enough. Could an investigation team be created that includes people from another department? Don't be afraid to do that if needed. Should the employer rely on different people for the fact-finding part of the investigation? The results analysis and any remedial action, this can be very important in cases where there might be perceived bias on the part of the investigator. And then, should precautions be taken so that post-investigation, the accused won't be able to retaliate against or show some kind of favoritism towards the investigator? If an accused is an executive, I feel like that doesn't happen very often, but if it is, in particular, perhaps the CEO or another member of the C-suite, should the investigation involve the board of directors or a board committee of some kind? Again, thinking about these things before you start the investigation process will be very helpful to the end result.
So now we're going to move on to what types of questions to ask. So a good interviewer or a good investigator is going to use a combination of open and closed questions and reframing these questions where necessary. You also want to keep in mind the 80-20 rule. 20% of the time should be the interviewer talking, but 80% of the time the interviewee is talking, and you're very closely listening to how they're responding to the questions and what information they're giving you. So pay very close attention to body language. Do they appear uncomfortable? Are they fidgeting? Are they not able to make eye contact? Oftentimes in the beginning of a conversation with an employee, we will have to ask a question and then pause and sit in silence, giving them space to respond. This is particularly important if you have employees that are more introverted or extremely cautious. They want to think through and form their responses in their mind before they verbalize it. So you want to leave that space in the conversation. So ask the question, but don't forget to listen. That's really the most powerful tool in your toolbox. So while you don't want to give people a huge amount of advance notice, especially if they're a witness or a wrongdoer, it's important to give notice to managers of the witness and certainly to a member of the executive team that an investigation is going to be initiated and which employees need to be spoken to. An employee's manager should understand that they may be removed from their workstation for a certain amount of time to participate in an investigation. It's also important to remind employees that they have a legal obligation to cooperate. It's not an option to refuse to participate in a work-related investigation. Again, giving someone time and space to speak and privacy is also important. So keeping in mind where you are sitting when you're asking the questions. Is it private? Can people walk by and see through a conference room? Is it glass walls? Are there privacy walls? Does the person that you're having the conversation with feel like they have privacy? So open-ended questions are critical, and these encourage employees to discuss what they saw, what they observed, what they experienced in an open-ended way. So, we listed 3 different ways here to frame a very similar type of question that's definitely open-ended. And then close-ended questions. Those are typically questions that ask for a yes or no answer. So you want to be very careful in confirming information with people. Maybe at the end of an open-ended question, you reconfirm with them their response by asking a yes or no question. If you're interviewing witnesses, you want to let them know that they're not the ones under investigation, but they may have witnessed or observed improper workplace misconduct. Put the person at ease. They may not know all the details, but they certainly have the ability to add a tremendous amount of value in confirming what did or did not happen. Direct questions are more efficient and effective than general questions. So you certainly want to have a good understanding from the complainant what happened, when it happened, where it happened, who were the witnesses, who were people that would possibly be aware of this situation, so that you can plan your questions in advance. So it's also very important not to ask leading questions. A leading question drives an employee or a witness to respond in a particular way. So we want to avoid those type of questions. It's very important when you're writing your questions out in advance that they're non-judgmental and you're not leading anyone into a particular answer. So we're giving some examples here on this slide that, these are the 5 common mistakes that people make. Asking a leading question, you're driving an employee to give a particular answer. Suggestive questions. These suggest to the interviewee what the answer should be. This should absolutely be avoided. This has the potential to derail an investigation and give you a false result. Compounding questions. This is when you're asking someone multiple questions all at once. It's hard for them to follow the line of questioning. Keep in mind, they're already nervous. They're already a little on edge. You want to put them at ease and ask one question at a time, get one answer at a time before moving on. Negative questions. So you're framing a question in a way that's automatically going to get you a negative response, or you're putting a judgment within the scope of questioning. Giving statements or opinions. as an investigator is also not appropriate. So you don't want to give out a judgment in the line of questioning. You want to be open-minded, you want to appear unbiased, and in the course of conducting an investigation, your opinion is not relevant, including your opinion is if an employee is named as a witness and they're generally not a strong performer, the automatic bias that they're not going to tell the truth or they may not be fully participating. Never make that assumption. Treat everyone with respect and dignity and with the assumption that they will fully participate in a cooperative manner.
Now, the essential elements of the investigation report include a summary of the incident, along with dates, the names of the people involved, key factual findings and determinations, applicable employer policies or guidelines, which may include applicable state, local, or federal laws, summary of the statements, allegations, and incidents, the analysis and conclusions, the name of the person who's making the final decision, issues that couldn't be resolved. You may find that there are a few that left outstanding, recommendations for future action, and employer actions taken.
So how do things go wrong? So there are some common mistakes. I would say there's probably top 7 common mistakes that people tend to make in an investigation. Failing to plan and just diving in head first, including failing to plan the order in which you intend to speak to the complainant, the person that has allegations against them, and the witnesses. Losing your objectivity. It's really important that you not begin to form opinions until you've spoken to every employee. There have been several times where we've been involved in investigations and it's the second to the last or the last witness that brings to light critical information that really needs to be heard and understood. Being distracted. Excuse me for a minute. We're also used to having a million distractions, that being present, focused, and in the moment with the person that you're interviewing is the best way to show up and really give them your full undivided attention. Turn off your phone. Don't be texting or looking at other emails, and be very focused on them. This is also part of making sure that everyone feels heard and that they have a chance to voice their concerns. Being overly aggressive. It's really very interesting that the best technique for getting people to speak is sitting in silence. When you pause and you wait and you say nothing, most people will, in a matter of 10 to 15 seconds, start to talk. So just give them time and space to do that. Failing to reach a conclusion at the end of the investigation. So generally, investigations have 3 potential outcomes. The allegations are true. The allegations are false, or things do not appear to be what they looked like on the outside, and the person that bringing forth the complaint did not have access to all the information, or it's impossible to determine based on the conversations with witnesses and the documentation involved if there really is unlawful or inappropriate behavior going on in the workplace. Other challenges that companies come up against is really a lack of policy. So not having a compliant discrimination and harassment procedure or a complaint procedure, not outlining this in the employee handbook about what employees can expect, what their obligations are, and what their role is. Also, what happens sometimes at employers is there's not a clear way to know who's a member of the management team. Is there a good phone list? Is there an organizational chart? If you have employees that work remotely or in a hybrid setting or in smaller divisions of a company, they might only know their manager and not feel like they have access to other managers or someone in human resources that they can contact. If you have several buildings or locations, where is HR located? How do you get to HR? What is their phone number? What is their email? Can people communicate outside of their working hours? Another consideration is how are workstations set up and what type of space and privacy do employees have? Do they have a way to submit a complaint, a concern, or a question without speaking or calling? Can they text? Can they send an email? So one of the things that we find here at Compass is employees often want to speak to us outside of their hours of actual work. They prefer to call from their cell phones, from privacy, and that they don't have that privacy afforded to them at the workplace. So when employees contact you, are you following and taking the next step? So make sure that your employees really know how to share complaints or concerns in the workplace.
So one of the other things that can definitely go wrong here is delaying or ignoring the need for an investigation. This is definitely going to undermine trust within your organization. It's that simple. Doing nothing or delaying can expose the company to legal risks, which can be costly for the company, at the very least catastrophic at the worst. We do have the Q&A session. In the interest of time, though, we have about 20 minutes left.
Sure.
We might want to skip that.
All right.
And move on to the next.
So some of the information that has been reported statistically, and we also covered it in our introduction, is that 60% of American workers have reported experiencing workplace harassment. 41% of these same employees stated that the employer did not investigate their complaint. So a delay in investigating complaints can definitely worsen the situation. So the EEOC regularly conducts studies, and they found that when a company reported having no sexual harassment complaints, this was actually not the case, that almost 30% of employees who experience harassment never take any sort of formal action, whether internal to the company or external. So in addition to legal liability, you want to make sure that your workplace is a positive place where people want to come. Are you training managers and supervisors to understand and inform employees how to make complaints, how to air concerns, how to get issues resolved? Employees who feel a lack of trust definitely find it more challenging to be effective and productive in their work. And this can cause a host of other issues outside the organization, including people that just resign. So you have employees that are good workers, and one day they've had enough. They decide that they're leaving the organization. So turnover can also be an indicator that there's challenges and issues going on in the workplace that are not being addressed.
Another thing that could go wrong is failure to collect and preserve relevant evidence. Items to collect and preserve here are going to include interviews of the complainants, as mentioned before, subjects and witnesses, review of any documents, records, communications, and in securing and storing any physical or digital evidence appropriately, always considering that there's a potential for tampering or destruction. You don't want to put anything to chance. Also, failing to document the investigation process. When you're documenting, don't forget to note the dates, the times, locations, names, and the roles of those people who are involved, questions asked and answers given, as well as evidence collected and analyzed. Finally, findings, conclusions, recommendations, and actions taken. All of those should be included.
One of the things that comes up quite frequently is bias, and we all have certain biases just based on our experiences, our upbringing, our frame of mind, and things that have happened to us at work. So oftentimes investigations can be handled internally, but if you think it's highly unlikely that those conducting the investigation can make a conclusion without including bias. So for example, a supervisor or manager who's investigating a direct report. It's highly unlikely that that person is not going to be biased, particularly if the person making a complaint is from another department, another area of the organization that the supervisor is not that familiar with. So you might want to get an outside professional who's confident that they can objectively perform an investigation and maintain credibility and secure trust of the organization and the employees. It's important to note how you would react if there's a conflict of interest concerns after someone raises them, or if you think about this issue and eliminate how bubbling up of those types of things can be addressed in advance. Retaliation. So we've mentioned several times that retaliation is where things that can go wrong. It's really important to note that the primary reason that employees do not report issues or concerns in the workplace, including behavior that's unlawful, harassment, and discrimination, is that they fear that they will be mistreated. So retaliation is astonishingly common. 68% of sexual harassment allegations and 42% of LGBTQ discrimination made to the Equal Opportunity Employment Commission include charges of employer retaliation. So that's retaliating for making a complaint in good faith. It's meaning taking an adverse consequence against that employee, treating them different, isolating them, demoting them, not giving them a raise or promotion. So the EEOC considers retaliation a separate charge, and retaliation complaints are always, in the last 10 years, the #1 complaint that the EEOC sees. So this outweighs charges of discrimination based on race, sex, national origin, or other types of protected classes. So if there's a situation where the harasser has been able to gain support from coworkers or other supervisors and members of the management team, this can really make the victim feel isolated. To ensure the victim and other employees are able to pull through and return to a positive work environment, it's important to follow up with them, and you might even want to give them access to an employee assistance program or some type of counseling. There's also the possibility that the accused, if found guilty, may attempt to retaliate against the accuser or the company. So be sure to reiterate with this person that the accuser has the right to report and that any form of retaliation will be cause for strict and immediate further disciplinary action. One of the services that we offer at Compass is called Ask HR. This is really a valuable tool, and it gives employees an outlet to ask questions, share their concerns, and to find out if something is bullying, just unlawful. And it could also be workplace performance feedback that their supervisor has every right to give them. Sometimes we'll hear from employees that they feel like they're being harassed at work, when what's really going on is supervisors are having conversations with them about attendance or lateness or accuracy and attention to detail, which makes the employee feel uncomfortable. But again, the supervisor has every right to be having these conversations with employees.
In an article, the EEOC showed that despite your best efforts to implement a fair disciplinary policy and ensure that managers apply the policy consistently, the employees may complain that they were treated unfairly for discriminatory reasons. For example, an employee may complain that he was punished more severely than other employees who broke similar rules because of his race. So conducting a prompt, thorough, and impartial investigation of the internal discrimination complaint is tremendous. The following tips may be helpful in this process. So it'd be important to ask the employee to explain why he or she believes he was treated differently than other employees, and identify other employees who believe they were treated more favorably. Meet with the manager, ask them to explain. Determine whether the disciplinary action was consistently applied. If you find evidence of discrimination, ensure that the discrimination stops immediately. Correct any effects of the discrimination and prevent it from happening again. If you determine that the punishment was warranted, inform the employee. Be sure that you're communicating. It may be helpful to explain the steps you took to investigate the complaint, the results of the investigation, and the basis for your decision, but please definitely do. Consider documenting the results of the investigation and any corrective or preventive action taken. The feelings of anger, frustration, or hurt that your employees might feel still linger. While you may wish that it would go away, it's important to acknowledge, understand, and decide what actions to take that will leave a strong, positive impact on your team. Acknowledge the problem. Offer counseling to victims and other employees involved if necessary. Take steps to curb any chance of retaliation and maintain constant communication with employees.
So we've talked a lot about conducting an investigation, but one of the best things that you can do is train your managers and supervisors and make their role crystal clear. So it's prevention. It's giving them the tools and resources and the words and an understanding of their obligation and how to respond. Managers and supervisors must be very aware of the impact that their own behavior can have as they are directly in contact with employees, and their role in handling the aftermath of an investigation or how they respond to an employee who wants to make an initial complaint can be particularly impactful. Give them well-structured training in managing workplace conflicts and how to demonstrate empathy and emotional intelligence. What does it mean to lead a diverse team? And how do they have conversations with their team that matters? You know, it's Carrie and I were preparing for this session, and I said to her, have you really ever met a manager or supervisor in the course of your career that's overtrained? Absolutely not. As much as you train people, if you're not doing role plays and you're not giving them scenarios and pairing them up and asking them to respond in the moment, this is something that requires practice. I think oftentimes people respond in an inappropriate way just because they're caught off guard. So make sure that your training really covers a lot of key areas. What is bullying? What does it mean to bully another employee? How do managers get help? Where do they report the behavior? What are their obligations under the law? Ensure that managers understand what is retaliation. And how can bullying behavior have a negative impact on the workforce, a team, an organization? And why do other employees need to stand up to bad behavior? How can they help a victim or someone that's experiencing this type of behavior in the workplace while maintaining safety and respect for all involved? So we've given you a lot of information. We definitely want you to feel like you're not alone. We are here as a resource for you to support you and help you. And because we know how important training is and how important your complaint policies are, we're offering special opportunities for people that are on the webinar today. So we're happy to review your complaint policy and give you some tips and feedback on, are you set up to conduct a legally defensible investigation? And is your policy legally defensible? Does it encourage people to report, to share concerns or complaints? We're also encouraging you to make sure that your managers and supervisors have live instructor-led training, an opportunity to ask questions in a safe environment that is just for them, where any concern that they have can be shared or aired and talked through with a credentialed HR professional that understands your policy, your complaint procedure, and can give them thoughts and direct feedback on how to address those types of concerns. We've also talked a little bit about our Ask HR Workplace Helpline. This is a resource that we've set up, and it's especially helpful for companies that have no HR department or very small HR departments available to them. It gives employees a way to contact a credentialed HR professional that understands the difference between bullying, harassment, discrimination, and performance management feedback. It also gives employees a way to contact someone outside of their direct working hours and be able to speak on the phone, email, or communicate via chat or video calls, whichever way they're most comfortable expressing their concerns. Any type of unlawful behavior is escalated to a member of your management team based on an escalation procedure that we develop in partnership with you. This gives companies a lot of insight into what is going on in the workplace. So we certainly know, we shared before, that only 30% of employees who experience harassment in the workplace ever take any type of action, including talking to a manager or supervisor about what's going on. Many of them just choose to leave or to quit and stay. We've seen terms for that several different times over the last decade. It's called people that are disengaged, quiet quitting. So there's always a new name for it, but it's really the same symptom. They're at work, but they're not productive, they're not engaged, and they're not high-performing members of a team. So with that, we'll ask you if you have any questions or comments. Also, in the links below, we've included some of the resources that we've used today. If you want to capture these and explore them more on your own. As always, we greatly appreciate everyone's showing up today and your feedback. If you scan the QR code here, you can share your feedback with us. If you enjoy the webinars, we encourage you to share them with friends and colleagues that may also find them beneficial. Our next session will be Wednesday, December 13th at noon, and we're going to really be diving into interviewing and selection, how to hire and select candidates that will have an immediate and positive impact on your organization.
So if you like these things, take a scan of that QR code, leave us a comment and let us know how we did. We'd be happy to present more for you. And if you have a suggestion on topics that you'd like to see, we're happy to explore those as well. We see a few things in the chat. Let's see what we've got. Let's see. Let's scroll to the end. You're most welcome. Thank you. Thank you for coming. And no, the invitation did not already go out for that session. We're actually excited about that too. There's going to be a little bit more of an interactive process there. So it should be a lot of fun. You'll get it as soon as we put it together. We're looking forward to it.
And just watch your emails. We'll send out the recording probably close to Friday so that you'll get a recording of the webinar. You'll get the PDF guide on the 10 steps to take to make sure that you're properly conducting your workplace investigation.
Thank you very much and enjoy the rest of your week.
All right, bye-bye until December 13th.